What does it take to build something people love, something they queue up for, something they tell their friends about, travel across cities for, quote in group chats at 2 a.m., something that against all odds continues to evolve and thrive? I Said What I Said has 2.2 million yearly plays, 1 million listening hours, and almost 93,000 followers on Spotify alone. It has taken its live shows to 8 cities across Africa, Europe, North America, 13 shows in total. It has landed partnerships with MTN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, and other brands. Its listeners are in Nigeria, Ghana, the UK, the US, and Canada. Its irreverent style of comedy has solidly cemented it in the hearts and minds of its audience as, by their own admission, the greatest podcast in the world. So from the outside looking in, you might think the podcast hosts simply got lucky, or that the African podcasting landscape is uncommonly fertile compared to other ventures. But what if I told you that for the first 5 years of this podcast's existence, they were barely breaking even? Sure, they had fame and an engaged fan base, but the journey to profitability and sustainability was an uphill climb. So, how did a podcast that almost no one was making money from become one of the most successful creative enterprises in Africa? That is exactly what we are going to find out today. Welcome to Creative Capital, a series where we break down how African creative entrepreneurs have built standout enterprises. And on today's episode, we will be mapping out the inspiring story of the I Said What I Said podcast. I Said What I Said launched on the 28th of August 2017 on Midas Radio. It was the brainchild of Jola Ayeye, who started a podcast on her own, but quickly realized that she needed a co-host. So she brought in Feyikemi Abudu, who had just returned to Nigeria and was willing to give it a shot, but on one condition. If it didn't work, they would delete every single episode and pretend it never happened. But the funniest thing happened. The first episode was an unprecedented success. Then again, that's the thing about success in media. Likes are not cash. But before we get into the money, let's look at who exactly is behind the mic. Jola, popularly known as Jollz, is the co-founder and head of development at Salt and Truth, a Lagos-based production company. She's a scriptwriter, and outside all of that, she runs Happy Noisemaker, a book club with over 27,000 followers on Instagram. FK, on the other hand, is the founder of Unpacked, a recycling plant and luggage design company based in Lagos. She's a chemical engineering graduate from University College London and has spent 6 years in business development and analysis and has since been named in the Time 100 Next Leaders. She's also, by her own admission, a seasoned advisor. Together, they built a podcast that now sits firmly among the top in Africa. It's currently in its 8th season, unpacking pop culture, career, money, dating, family, and the many confusions of modern adulthood with honesty and irreverent humor. It's done live shows in Lagos, Abuja, Accra, Dublin, New York, Toronto, Manchester, London, and it has plans to expand further in 2026. But none of that happened overnight. And more importantly, none of it happened by accident. So let's talk about how they actually grew the audience, because the approach is worth studying. For the first 4 years, the podcast was an audio-only operation. They didn't start posting YouTube videos until 2021. And even then, they kept it modest. 20 to 40-minute clips from 2-hour episodes. Short, punchy, shareable. Those clips would consistently pull anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 views. But then they noticed a phenomenon. There were entire chunks of their audience that refused to listen on Spotify. Some of these people were aware of the audio podcast, but they preferred to watch rather than listen. Others kept falling into the misconception that the podcast was only about 40 minutes long. And they came back faithfully for those 40 minutes on YouTube alone, completely unaware that they were missing hours of content. Now, this exposed a gap, and that gap was data for them. By 2024, they began posting full-length videos in response to what they noticed. Since then, the number of views has more than doubled. Some videos are now hitting 90,000 views. This goes to show that sometimes you need to run experiments based on what your audience is actually doing, not what you assume they want. Then again, this raises an interesting question about YouTube economics. Is the podcast making significant money off of those YouTube streams? Let's do a thought experiment. You've probably heard about the term CPM, or cost per mile. It's essentially the rate that advertisers pay to reach your audience. The higher your CPM, the more money you make from the same number of views. And CPM is not equal across the board. It varies wildly depending on who is watching and where they are. There is a concept that explains this really well. It's called the Audience Anchor Ratio, AAR, a term that we at Communicate coined in the 2026 African Creator Economy Report. The AAR measures the relationship between the number of creators and the size of their audience in a given region. An AAR greater than 1 means that there are more viewers than creators chasing them, which forces advertisers to bid higher to reach that audience. There are regions with strong purchasing power, North America, the UK, and Western Europe. Nigeria's AAR on YouTube sits at 0.33%. Really, what that means is that most Nigerian creators earn a fraction of what their counterparts in London earn for the same number of views. The platform is the same, the quality of the content might be the same, but the advertiser dollars simply are not at the same level because of AAR. Here's where I said what I said does something smart. The audience isn't just in Nigeria. They've built a genuinely diasporic listenership. People in Dublin, Toronto, Manchester, Amsterdam, and New York. These are audiences in high AAR markets. So I said what I said isn't just an African podcast. It's an exportable product. And that distinction almost certainly puts their CPM in a more favorable bracket than most Nigerian creators on the same platform. Now, let's get into the other ways they make money, because content strategy is only half the story. Their first live show was held in Lagos in 2021. Tickets started at 5,000 Naira and it was held at the Civic Center in Victoria Island. Because of how successful it was, the rave reviews they got, that same year they did shows in Abuja and Accra. But the real inflection point was the first London show. Jola described it plainly in an interview. As soon as we were able to plan, produce, and execute a show outside of the country, the way people looked at us changed completely. What made the London show possible was a Spotify grant, actual cash, not in-kind support.
3 or 4 years ago, we got a grant from Spotify. They gave us actual money, and that went towards helping us do our first international live show, our first show in London.
By using that money to fund their first international show in April 2023, they proved exactly what happened when creators who have proven their competence are finally given the resources instead of just more mentorship. Tickets to the 700-seater assembly hall at Shoreditch Town Hall sold out in almost 3 hours. A historic first for any African podcast. It was a blueprint for the future. If you want to see creators scale, we have to stop offering mentorship as a substitute for sponsorship, especially when they have already shown and documented what they are capable of. As you can probably tell, hours and hours of research went into making this video possible. So if you're enjoying it, please like the video and subscribe to this channel so we can do more work like this. Since that first London show, they've performed in Manchester, Dublin, and New York, and in August 2025, they held their first Toronto show at the Danforth Music Hall. In December 2025, they had another Lagos show, 13 shows in total, some 2-day shows, others repeated year after year in cities like Lagos and London. The pattern is consistent. Build an audience in a city, sell tickets, create the in-person experience, and if the numbers make sense, you repeat, you go again. Ticket prices have remained deliberately accessible. Their December 2023 show in Lagos, Stacked December, had tickets priced at 12, 18, and 25,000. For context, this is genuinely affordable compared to the concert market in Lagos. And it's not accidental. They insist on curating affordable experiences because it keeps the community broad, inclusive, and loyal. It also sends a clear message that they care about people and are not out of touch, which reinforces the entire premise of their podcast. This last point is super important because beyond the traditional live show format, I Said What I Said has built a secondary layer of community events that deserve their own analysis. The I Said What I Said Owambe held in December 2021 is probably the most creative example. The price of admission was some fabric, ashoebi like we call it, priced at 15,000 Naira. So you're not just buying a ticket, you're buying into the aesthetic of the event itself. There was unlimited food and drinks and a price of 100,000 Naira for the best dressed. They also ran raffle draws around that period with tickets starting at around 200 naira and prizes ranging from mother and baby hampers to plane tickets, televisions, air conditioners, and even concert tickets for well-known artists like Tiwa Savage and Wizkid. Now, raffle economics are worth understanding for a second. When the prizes are desirable enough, people don't just buy one ticket, they buy many in an attempt to game the system and improve their chances. That drives margins up for the host. And in the case of I Said What I Said, many of the prizes were funded through brand partnerships. That is, companies providing products in exchange for visibility at the events.
Today's gift, though, is by us and Flutterwave.
Yes. Flutterwave is bringing cool cash to the table.
1 million Nigerian naira.
1 million naira.
1 million Nigerian naira.
So the prize cost was subsidized, but the raffle revenue remained theirs. They also ran a Valentine's speed dating show in February 2024, a big bounce bash in December 2024, and the economics must have made sense because they threw another one in December 2025. Each of these events serves a dual function. One, they are revenue generating, and two, they deepen the sense of community around the podcast. With these events, you're not just a listener anymore, you're a part of something. I Said What I Said has done a masterful job of monetizing its audience engagement through brand deals and promotions. But we can all learn something from how they approach these endorsements. When advertisers first started approaching them, the team did something that many early stage creators didn't have the confidence to do. They pushed back on how the ads were done. Their most illustrative example is the Central Bank of Nigeria campaign around phishing scams. At first, they were asked to read an ad during the episode, but the host said no to that. They proposed something different. Bring in an actual fraud perpetrator and someone who had been scammed. Let her explain what happened step by step, and then let him explain what was happening on the back end in real time. It aired, and it was by any measure a much better idea than simply reading out an ad. That willingness to dictate the creative terms of an endorsement is a significant part of how they've built credibility with both their audience and brands. When brands come to them, they don't just blindly take deals. Depending on the conversation they've had, they either do a sketch, as they did with Miss Sand by Bamboo, or an event, as with Garnier. The advertising roster includes but is not limited to Bamboo, MTN, Flutterwave, Topicals, AfriChange, L'Oreal, Mold the Label, For Style's Sake, Desiree Yama, Bolden, Garnier, and more. It's incredible. But one thing remains constant. Brands that want to reach their audience have to meet them on their own terms. And then there is Grownupicity. Launched officially in December 2024, Grownupicity is a platform for women navigating the adult world, budgeting tools, vendor lists, financial guides, career development advice, wellness resources, and vision boards. It's the infrastructure of grown-up life. And this makes sense, considering that their audience is made up of Gen Z and millennials trying to navigate adulting while maintaining their spark. The launch was marked with an exclusive dinner for female business owners, grant winners, and sponsors, including MoneyPoint. They also run the Pink List, a curated directory of businesses run by women. None of this is random. It is a product of years of listening to an audience, identifying their needs, and building toward them with intention. And this is the true line of this entire story. I Said What I Said spent years trying multiple forms of monetization and content types, and accumulating a wealth of data and experience before reaching a point where the podcast could pay for itself. Only then could they move to a self-hosted podcast production company, run multiple international live shows, and build a sizable team. None of these pieces came together by luck. They happened because Jola and FK kept paying attention.
The biggest thing I learned this year is to follow the data. I'm very big on just believe, just try. And I will try and I will believe, but I do think following precedent is good.
The podcast was the entry point. The live shows built the community. Grownupicity is the ecosystem, and once you have an ecosystem, you've moved beyond being just a podcast host. You're now a media company. More importantly, a media company with something that most media companies spend years trying to manufacture. an audience that actually trusts you. That trust was earned experiment by experiment, city by city, episode by episode, and that is precisely why it is so difficult to replicate.